Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Ranking the Retros Roundtable. I am Wayne, your host, and with me today is Jerry.
Hello, everybody.
And first-time participant. I was going to say joinee, but that would have sounded really weird. But English is not my strong suit. Over there, we have Sammy.
Thank you, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
It is a pleasure to have you. The pleasure is all mine. If I only had pleasure to give.
Jeez.
This podcast is all about taking a look at old games and rating them amongst themselves. As I've said in the past couple episodes, we are starting with all the earliest of early NES games, which are the black box games, those fancy games that came in like the, black boxes and had some cool artwork on the front that kind of gave you an idea what you're looking at for the game. There are 30 of them. We're slowly chipping away at them. And as we play them nowadays, we realize, is this really what we played back then?
Yeah.
But you were starting to realize, to be fair, a lot of these games I've never played as a kid. I played like the good ones, the Excite Bikes, the Kung Fu's, the Marios. But some of the other games, like today's games, which are going to be Ice Climber, Popeye, and Clu Clu Land. Yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't grow up with these, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To start, the last couple episodes, I just asked a general question, get some knowledge out there, but I decided to spruce things up a little bit for this episode. I'm going to be asking a pop quiz with our contestants being Jerry and Sammy. I have not decided on what the reward will be yet. I have an idea, but we'll get there eventually. This is just for fun, just to start the podcast out right. So I have 5 questions in front of me. You may shout out the answer. If you know it, great. If you don't, no big deal. Every man for himself. Are you guys ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
I'm not ready, but we should carry on anyway.
Excellent. They're not difficult. They are difficult questions, but they're based on the games that we played.
They're difficult, but they're not difficult. Okay.
It's the same thing, but different,
Right. Yeah, that thing.
I think I understand now.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 1. What is the name of Player 1's character in Clu Clu Land?
Oh my gosh. I didn't know we were signing up for this.
That was part of the fun of not telling you what we were doing.
And
if you don't know, you can guess. I don't care.
Oh.
You're not going to be penalized over
Bubbles.
not knowing these answers.
Bubbles. Is it Bubbles?
You cheated, didn't you?
No.
It is actually Bubbles.
Yay.
Cheers, you must be psychic.
Maybe psycho.
Yeah, for playing this game. Yeah.
You saw it in the manual, didn't you?
Well,
at some point.
How do I say this? I was thinking about the game as you were obviously asking the question. I thought about it, and I remember in one of my rants that I was typing out feverishly, I remembered the name because I put I had something to say about that because, I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but
yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
All right, number 2. In what year did Popeye first appear in a comic book or a comic strip? With this one, we'll give whoever is closest.
I'm going to say 1965. I don't know.
Well, I was in 1964. Now I feel compelled to pick a date that's much further from the one you picked.
You're welcome.
So I'll say 1946.
46. Okay. Jerry, are you sticking with 65?
I'm going to say 1950.
50?
I feel like we're playing The Price is Right now.
Well, if that would be the case, you would both be over.
Really?
Popeye first appeared in the comic in 1929.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't realize he was that old.
That's crazy.
I didn't know that.
That's the year Isn't that the year that Steamboat Willie came out? That was in the late 20s too, yeah?
It
I feel like
was,
it's
I
somewhere
believe.
around there. I don't know the exact
So
year
that
off the top of my head.
Hold on, let's look that up.
old.
Let's look that up. Steamboat Willie.
I
Oh,
think it was 28 or 29, but
let's see. It says Steamboat Willie, according to Wikipedia. I have to put a qualifier on that. Steamboat
So on the
Willie.
internet, it's true.
Yeah. Thanks for talking over me, sir. Steamboat. It's your show. Okay. I'm a professional. Steamboat Willie is a 1928 American animated short film directed by Walt Disney. And what did you say? 1920 or
29.
I said I thought it was 29 as well, but it was 28. Maybe I just didn't see it until 1929.
Very close though. In Ice Climber,
Wait.
the Yeti was. Oh.
Wait. We're just gonna gloss over what he just said? Wait a minute. You just. We have a time traveler here, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, when I was your age, we used to eat dirt, and we were grateful to eat that dirt.
What kind of toppings did you put on the dirt?
That stuff was awesome.
Is there like any specialty, like special toppings or any sort of ways to improve
if you
the dirt?
use pebbles, it's like sprinkles.
On Sundays, after we walked 8 miles home from church, we used to have wet dirt, and that was a real treat.
Moving on before this gets completely side-railed.
Okay.
Composure.
Yeah. Right.
Question number 3. In Ice Climber, the Yeti was first designed to be what creature?
The answer isn't the Yeti?
Right. It is not the Yeti. They originally intended it to be something else before they changed it.
Huh.
I have no idea. I don't even know what to guess.
Is it Gossamer from Looney Tunes?
No, it is not. It was a seal.
A seal?
What?
The Yetis were originally going to be a seal, but Nintendo did not think that clubbing seals would be a bright idea in a video game.
That's fair.
That is very fair.
That's fair. And anyway, I mean, come on, how imposing is that anyway?
So instead, you just club a Yeti over the head. But again, we'll get there.
I mean,
question number 4. It's a multiple choice question. So,
all right.
Which of these vegetables grant the most points in Ice Climber? Eggplants, turnips, mushrooms, or zucchinis?
Okay, given that this is a Nintendo game, I'm going to say mushrooms.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing any zucchinis. I'll say eggplant for 1,000.
It is mushrooms.
Oh.
For those that were worth the most, 5,000 points. I have not seen them in the game either. I did not get that far.
I mean, that was just a lucky guess. You know, Nintendo, Mario, they've shoved Mario into almost everything at this point. So I felt like it was a safe guess.
All right, final question. What famous comedian played Popeye in the 1980 film?
Roger Williams, wasn't it?
Roger Williams? Robin Williams?
Robin Williams. Popeye. I didn't think it was as old as 1980. But...
It was Robin Williams.
Yeah.
All right.
And Sammy got that one first, so we're going to give it to him. So you both got 2 right.
Sweet.
So you both get 2 points, which
my question is,
good for yet.
Do you have a tiebreaker now?
No, because it's going to go on to the next episode then. So we'll figure it out then.
Okay.
So, with all that said, congratulations, you guys. It was a nice little tie. But with that said, let's move on to Ice Climber, the first game of this episode. It was released in October of 1985. It was another vertical scrolling game where you play as an ice climber climbing up a mountain. That's really all it comes down to. As I said before, I struggled with this game heavily.
Yeah. What mountain did you make it to?
I made it to Mountain 11. And that was after multiple continues, because this is one of those games where you get to continue indefinitely. and you
Mhm.
can also choose which mountain you start at. But that was like my breaking point at Mountain 11.
I only made it to 5 with a
Okay.
high score of 14,900 points because
I could not tell you my high score off the top of my head.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I could not one time beat a bonus level. Like
Me either.
yeah, that was rough.
I
Ugh.
was able to actually do it, but again, after multiple playthroughs and Mountain 11, I was bound to do it eventually. But where do we even start with this game? Who wants to start? Because I feel like if I start, I'm going to go on a tirade.
I guess I will. I didn't enjoy the game all that much, and I'll be honest, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I won't play it again, I can tell you that. And my main frustration with this game, the controls are awful. Like just
Mhm.
awful. And they feel honestly clunkier. I'm not picking on this, I swear. They feel clunkier than Donkey Kong Jr. They really do. Like
You
to
had
me.
to bring up that game again.
Well, you
It
know,
hurts.
you talk
I
about
finally started getting sleep, and then you bring it up, and now I'm not going to be able to sleep for the next week and a half. Thanks, I appreciate that.
that's a little dramatic, but okay. But you know, you talk about the black box games being a baseline essentially for what's to come. It's just like right now Donkey Kong Jr. is a baseline for a game that is not very responsive and has very rough controls, and similar to Ice Climber, like it doesn't play well. I was frustrated by it. It was not an enjoyable experience.
Sammy, what about you? What did you think about Ice Climber?
To be fair, I only played this week's games very briefly. And on top of that, I'm not really great at a lot of console games because I didn't have console games growing up. I didn't learn how to play console games really until college.
Mhm.
And so I don't have the same length of muscle memory that you guys do because I just didn't do it that much. I really had a hard time finding the rhythm in the game of, coordinating my jump with my left and right movements. I had a really hard time doing it. And, every game kind of has its own curve, but really once you figure out the rhythm, then it's okay. But boy, I really struggled with this one the whole time. It's hard to say if I would have liked the game otherwise, though. I mean, it was fine. It was just kind of a progression game, and that's usually a pretty good kind of zone out type of game for me. But yeah, I had a really hard time getting the hang of it.
That's fair. And I like the fact that you said that you didn't really play a lot of these games growing up. I feel like that gives a unique spin on this. Kind of like
Mm,
that. Not gonna lie, because again, I grew up playing these. So did Jerry. Maybe not
mhm.
necessarily these games, but we still grew up with the system.
Yeah.
I know my main nitpick with this game isn't necessarily about the mechanics themselves in general. Be specific on it, it was the jumping mechanics that I had trouble with.
Mm,
Yeah,
I can move around, no problem. But once it came to jumping, there were way too many times. There's no distance on your jump. When you leap up, basically the way it works is as you're jumping, you're breaking blocks above you, and that's how you climb a mountain. You're basically breaking these blocks, and then you build enough of a gap in between that you can get up a level. But the problem is, it's like one of those older games where as the screen moves up, you cannot fall back down, otherwise you lose a life. My problem is that because there's no distance to the jumps, it's very hard to accurately judge when you should jump and where you think you're going to land.
mm,
I know there were many times where I'd hit the jump button, but either nothing would happen and I just plummet to my death, I'd overshoot a platform and plummet to my death, or jump and for some reason go right through the edge of a platform to my death.
mm,
That was usually why I failed the bonus levels because I jump. I think I'm where I need to be to get to the next higher platform, but then my character would just fall right through it. And that, like to me, that is the most frustrating thing is just not being able to properly jump, which is a huge centerpiece to this game. you're trying to jump up a mountain. It's
Right.
all about jumping. So if you don't have solid jumping mechanics, you're not gonna have an enjoyable time because you don't really feel like you have control of the character, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like that's my 2 cents on like the mechanics.
Yeah.
Clunkiness, yeah, it's a bit clunky. I don't know if I'd say it's as bad as Donkey Kong Jr. is, but there was definitely a solid movement. But if you can't jump, it causes a problem. Now, saying that, one thing I did like about this game is that you actually have a way to defend yourself.
Hmm.
When you have like the aforementioned Yeti, when you have those little creatures that are pushing ice blocks around to basically recreate or fill up the gaps that you created, you can run up to them and smack them in the face with a mallet. That's something that I feel like this game desperately needed. If it did not have that way to defend itself, I would have considered it one of the worst games I've ever played. Now, I will say it took me a little while, and you guys might not have even gone far enough to really realize that you can do this. It's another one of those screen wrapping games where if you move to the left or right, you'll come out on the other side.
Right. I did see that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it.
Because there's actually a further level where you have to do that in order to proceed. One thing that is positive, again, you are able to defend yourself, which is huge. That's not something we really saw a lot of so far. And the game has background music, and it's not bad.
Mhm.
It's actually kind of catchy. Like back then, like a lot of them, you got sound effects, and that was about it. But actually getting background music in a game as you're playing is actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
And one last thing that I have to comment on: what is their fascination with eggplants back then? There are so many games. It's not just this one. Like the early Adventure Island games are the other ones I can think of off the top of my head where you have to battle eggplants. Although those are evil in that game. Here you actually want to collect them. But it's kind of weird that you just find random eggplants and other vegetables on the top of a mountain that you're trying to collect before you jump onto a pterodactyl. Because that's what awaits you at the top of each mountain is a pterodactyl.
Right.
It's weird. It's weird. You have to wonder if they were on some of those eggplants or mushrooms or something when they were creating the game.
Yeah. Magical eggplants.
Yeah, not to mention, I think eggplants require the temp climate. So very peculiar to see them on an icy mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was.
That's not the first thing you think of.
That's like the first vegetable you find too. I think that's in level 1s.
Yeah.
How about we rate this game so we can move? You guys want to start, or you want me to start?
No, go ahead. Take it away.
I'm personally thinking between Wrecking Crew and Gyromite. I feel like it might be a little high. I mean, if Donkey Kong Jr. was higher, like I feel like it should be, I feel like it would be a little under that. But out of the games we have listed here, I think I'd rather play Gyromite or Wrecking Crew. Or I'd rather play Wrecking Crew, but Gyromite's just a little too gimmicky, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because at least with Ice Climber, you don't need Rob, and you don't need a Zapper.
Right.
But to me, it's not a great game. It's kind of like a mediocre one that has a huge flaw.
I agree. I would agree with where you're wanting to place it myself. I don't disagree with anything you said there. This might be the first time we really agreed on that.
Right. Sammy, it's up to you. What do you think?
Well, geez, this is the week that I played any of these games with you guys. So I don't have a set of games
That's fair.
To rank it. I will say that it is, of the 3 that we played this week, I would put it in the middle. I'd rank it number 2. Games that I said that I haven't played a lot of this, but I played a little bit. You played Donkey Kong. That was probably the NES game I'm most exposure to in my younger years. And this does not even compare.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, Donkey Kong was, I thought it was a lot of fun in my limited experience.
And that is a game we have not played yet. We played Junior and the other game that I don't want to mention, so I won't. But we have not played the original Donkey Kong yet.
Just say it.
So yeah.
Just say it.
Nope. We said we shall never speak of it again. So yeah, Ice Climber, we're gonna put at number 6. which is between Wrecking Crew and Gyromite. I think that's a good place for it.
I would agree.
All right, let's move on. Game number 2, we will be talking about Clu Clu Land, which is kind of fun to say, but not as fun to play. This game was released. It was released also in October 1985. It's I guess you can call it a puzzle game, because what you're doing is you're controlling this little fish-like blob as it's uncovering what eventually becomes the rupees from the Legend of Zelda games, trying to come up with a pattern by uncovering 32 rupees per level. And I believe there are 20 drawings, if I have my notes correct. Again, I'll leave the floor up to you guys to start, because, again, I might rage a bit on this one.
Yeah, what kind of a name is Bubbles anyway? There, I said it.
I kind of like the name Bubbles.
Fine, whatever.
I also like the name Clu Clu Land. It's kind of fun to say. But my problem with this one is that it's even worse than Ice Climber. Do you want me to start this time? I feel like I never start, so I guess I can start. The biggest problem with this game, I think what actually ruins the game, are the controls. Because you don't directly control Bubbles. Instead, you have all these poles around the room. In order to move, Bubbles is constantly moving. He or she never stops. In order to turn direction, what you have to do is hold down A and then press one of the buttons, or directional buttons. And then what it'll do is grab one of those poles and start swinging around it. And then you let go when he's in the direction that you want to go. This sounds fine in concept until you start playing and realize this absolutely sucks. Because there are instant kill pits where the enemies will spawn, which you can kill the enemies, thankfully. But I just never, not once in this game, did I ever feel like I had complete control over the fish. I got to level 4 every time I played this game, and I could not beat level 4, no matter how many times I've tried. Even if I knew what the diagram was going to be, and I absolutely tried, I could not do it.
I didn't make it past level 1, so.
Really? You couldn't even get past level 1?
And did you know that, I think this is maybe a little bit topical, but I find it comical too. But did you know that in a June 1986 survey of the NES catalog, which I know it's a 1986 survey, so you're going to have a limited amount of options there at that given time, but the Chicago Tribune singled out Clu Clu Land and Ice Climber for keeping their interest after repeated plays. So the Chicago Tribune, according to what I've found in my, I just thought, I came across this and I thought it was interesting because
that's very interesting.
Literally, it's covering 2 games that we are discussing this week. And
now,
but
I will say this though, like, I don't know about you, I've never played either of those games growing up.
Same.
Never. My first exposure to these games was, I believe, on the Wii U's NES Remix. And I played them, and I didn't even like them then. And those were just in bite-sized chunks to get like high scores and do challenges. I didn't even like them then. Like, I like to think that I have an open mind when it comes to video games. I enjoy a lot of old games. Again, I absolutely love Donkey Kong Jr. You guys apparently didn't. But, like, I'm sure I like Gyromite. I enjoy Gyromite. I'm sure a lot of people don't like that game. Wrecking Crew, you enjoyed it. I didn't. So, we've played a lot of these games, and even though we didn't really necessarily play them growing up, the fact that we grew up in that era kind of helps, if that makes sense, that we understand what the technical limitations were at the time. But even saying that, growing up, I feel like I would have had a hard time playing Clu Clu Land, because it is so difficult to adjust your path of movement. Granted, yeah, you can defeat the enemies by basically stunning them with your sound wave or whatever that is, and then smashing them up against the wall. But that doesn't help any when you have those enemy spawners where if you just let go of A in the wrong time, and your character is above one of those spawners, it's an instant death. There's no way around it. So that's what killed me on level 4. There's like 3 or 4 spawners, and the room wraps, and I believe it gets a little bit faster. I can't even imagine what later levels would be like. Now, but saying all that, again, that's my biggest complaint is I'm fine with old games. I love playing Atari games. Kaboom, Pitfall, Megalomania, games like that.
Those are better controls and a better feel overall compared to Clu Clu Land, though.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
That's what I'm here for.
They controlled, and look, Grant, yes, it was a simpler time. You had a joystick and one button. But that's the thing, like, this isn't that much more advanced. Like, graphically it is. Conceptually it is. Clu Clu Land could have existed on the Atari 2600.
Absolutely. It would have been, if I would dare say it would have been better because of the 2600 control. I don't know how
you would have done the controls. Maybe use it so that the button shoots the wave and then you just directly move your
with
character.
The joystick.
Yeah, I feel like if that's what Nintendo would have done with this game, just allow the D-pad to move your character directly, this would have been a fantastic game. Granted, it would have took some of the challenge out. They would have had to do something for the challenge. But if it's just, I could not wrap my head around the controls. More specifically, rough. The movement of the character.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was difficult for sure.
And as I said, like, there are times where, like, I played the game so many times, I knew what the drawing was going to be. So I was able to already know, all right, that I got to go here and here, and then I got to skip over to here, hit those two, wrap around, go south, and hit a couple areas here. I still couldn't do it because, like, I knew, like, my mind knew what I was supposed to do, but then when it came to actually using the controller to get them there, I just couldn't do it correctly. And then I would get frustrated because I'd be off by like 90 degrees. My character would shoot off the wrong way, and I'd be like, "Oh, come on!" I know that was common in our chat that we had before the podcast started too. Jason was unable to join us today, but he was definitely voicing his frustrations over both this and Ice Climber. I think he would have had a little more disparaging words, but I think the sentiments are the same. Where like it's a flawed game that just one little programming
tweak.
I don't know how to put it. Yeah, tweak. Perfect. One programming tweak would have made it just that much more enjoyable. Like, granted, I get it. You know, it's an early game, but there's other early games that played better.
Absolutely.
It just goes to show, like
Mario 1, for example.
Yeah, it just goes to show control is everything.
Yep.
Like, if you have a great game,
and they obviously figured that out down the line, right? So, I mean, that's the thing with these black box games, that as frustrated as I mean, again, and my reactions were in the moment, and I was pretty frustrated, but I also have been really trying to be mindful of the fact that these are those introductory titles, and this is at the time is a new technology, right? So I think there's something that you have to be mindful of there with that too. Obviously, things, as we know, get better and better and better. It's just that we have to play through all the crap in its infancy.
To be fair, there are a lot of late game releases or late console releases that were also kind of crap, but we'll get there. We will get there. There are some of these games, like Super Mario, like Excite Bike, like eventually we'll get to it, Kung Fu. They're like the gems of the black box games.
Yep.
Like, it's like, it doesn't matter how bad some of the other games are. Those are the games you want to own, you know?
It's just, unfortunately, the ratio of good black box games versus bad, it's not close, in my opinion.
It's almost like I wonder if Nintendo was just coming up with a random idea to see what would sell consoles quicker, just to see what would stick. And then they're like, all right, well, you know, games like Mario, people love platformers, so let's just keep making platformers. And then once other third parties started getting into it, you know, they decided to start branching out as well. And then we got that library we all know and love.
Yeah.
Sam, you're kind of quiet over there. What are your thoughts?
I agree with both of you that it was very, very challenging to play this game. Kind of like you were at a roller rink and you were skating along and you grabbed onto a pole, except in this scenario, your hands are greased and one of the wheels on your roller skate's not working, and it feels absolutely impossible to
I love that. I love that
predict.
analogy. That sums this game up perfectly. I could not have put it
Could
better myself.
not say that any better. So well said.
Yeah, yeah. So just really frustrating, and it feels like you're right on track, and then all of a sudden he keeps spinning around the post. And you're like, well, what do I do now? And because of the pace of the game, it's difficult to recover after any one wrong turn. Very, very challenging. And if I ever see a tiny round red fish again in my life, it'll be too soon.
Well, unless it's a
I think-
Swedish fish, that's not that bad, right?
Well, at least those you
I
eat
tell
them,
you,
and then they go
I
away.
think I think fish are nasty. I don't know. And it's funny because like I think their meatballs are fine, but the fish are awful. Yeah, absolutely gross. And I like pretty gross stuff. Like I like black licorice, and I
Oh, me
like
too.
and I like the
Like jelly beans.
You guys
I
are
like the black jelly beans. And
okay.
if
We
you've ever
need
had,
to just not. Let's just pretend that was never said. Okay. I like both of you guys too much. All right.
and have you guys ever had the German gummy bears?
I
No,
don't think I have.
I have not.
They're not sweet. They're chewy. They don't have such strong fruity flavors.
Actually, sounds amazing.
Yeah, I like them because they're not so sweet. But most Americans, well, not that I've taken a survey, but most people that I've encountered like the American style gummy bears a lot better because they're softer and they're more flavorful. But I actually like the German ones. But
I
anyway,
don't know.
my
Hot
point
take.
is,
I'm not a gummy bear fan, so
oh well,
it sounds like I might
fair
actually
enough.
like the German ones.
Yeah, maybe. Fair enough. Because I like some pretty gross candy, and I think Swedish fish are just an abomination. So,
You think you know somebody after all these years?
All right, let's rate
Everyone's-
this stupid game. What do you guys?
I
think?
love how Clu Clu Land just evolved and veered into the territory of candy. That's
Yeah.
pretty great. So as far as where I would rank this, personally, it's going between Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong Jr. Math. I know we're not supposed to say the game, but I have to for the sake of this ranking.
No, we said that we could say the game when it comes in to rankings.
Well, that's
So.
that's where I would place it myself personally.
So you're rating it pretty low.
I did not enjoy it. This game was awful.
Yeah.
Sammy, what are you thinking?
well,
I know you
having-
said you haven't played many of the games, but
No, that actually have an answer for this. Having not played any of the other games on the list, I would Donkey Jr. Math is at the bottom. I would skip 3 spaces and then put this game.
I was
I'm over
very
here playing by
unsure.
the rules, and he's like, "Now
Yeah.
we're dropping that lower."
I was very on the fence of where I want to put this game.
Wayne, are you gonna upset me right now?
No, I'm not. I was gonna put it there, but then I'm like, no, that's too low. Like, you guys aren't gonna go that low. I was originally gonna put it between Gyromite and Wild Gunman, but the fact that you said that you guys would put it between Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong Jr. Math, that actually is a weight lifted off my shoulder.
I mean, in fairness,
Because-
Sammy said he would drop it 3 spots lower than
That is true,
TKJ
that is
Math. So
But
yeah,
I just wasn't sure if I wanted to put it that low because there are other games on the list that I would rather play, and then there are other games on the list I would rather not play, if that makes sense.
for me,
But-
the fact that I didn't, and I gave it an honest effort, but the fact that I could not progress past level 1 is the reason why I would put it in the spot that I've placed it in.
Yeah. No, I get it. Like, as I said, like I thought about putting it there, but I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to go that low. Because there are other games like I'm like, all right, it's a little bit better. Wild Gunman, Wild Gunman's kind of fun if you have a zapper, but if you don't, it loses its interest. Gyromite, you kind of need Rob, but I still think it's better because you can still play it and it's still an enjoyable game. But I, it's just Donkey Kong Jr. being so low is what's ruining all my rating ideas.
You really got to let that go, man.
It's not happening until I'm happy with where other games are in the list.
Well, at least there's that, right? You can look at it and say there's going to be more games, and more than likely, your beloved Donkey Kong Jr. is going to make its way further up the list.
Maybe one day we'll do like a special edition where we all choose a game that we want to re-rate.
I think you should just do a special edition where you just sit and rant for 20 minutes as to why you felt like everybody else is wrong for ranking Donkey Kong Jr. so low.
Do not tempt me. So yeah, we are pretty much all in agreement. Clu Clu Land is second to last, number 10, between Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong Jr. Math. So the Donkey Kong Jr. games have been separated. All right, with those two out of the way, we come to the main feature, which thankfully, at least I think it was a much better game, Popeye. This one was released, the Popeye the Sailor Man. This game was released in June of 1986 in the US, but it was released on July 15th of 1983 in Japan. So there was a pretty major delay for us getting it. I want to say, is this like the first licensed game that was ever released?
Well,
I can't think of any that came out before that.
I was going to ask you too. Is it true that it was released originally in 1982 as an arcade?
I did not see the arcade game. That's definitely possible. The dates that I got were based on the NES and the Japanese Famicom.
Okay.
So the arcade probably was released in 82. Oh, okay. So apparently there was this is not the first licensed video game. It's probably the first on the NES. But apparently one of the very first licensed games is called Fonz, a Sega rebranded version of a game Motocross featuring Fonzie from Happy Days. You learn something new every day.
That you do.
I would love to meet the marketing genius who cooked that up.
Right?
It's such a bizarre entry into the market.
So like when you put a coin in, does it just go, "Hey"?
Hey!
Oh my gosh. Oh, could you imagine hearing that in an arcade? All of a sudden it's like the only thing. It's on loop.
Anywho, Popeye is a game that probably best compared with Donkey Kong. It's a single screen arcade game where you have olive oil on the top of the screen throwing down specific objects to each stage, and all Popeye has to do is collect them before they fall to the very bottom of the screen and sink in the water while he avoids a couple threats, one of which being Brutus.
Yeah, and I love the name.
Popeye.
I love the name Sea Hag, by the way.
Oh, did you get far enough to actually see the sea hag?
Is that the bird or the whatever?
The sea hag's usually, I think, on the right side of the screen, just like throwing skulls at you.
Yeah, I didn't get that far.
It shows up. Yeah, she shows up after the first loop. There's only 3 levels of the game. Once you complete 3 levels, you get to do it again with the sea hag involved, and she's just throwing skulls all over the place. Brutus is still attacking you.
Yeah, that sounds like chaos.
It gets pretty frantic. I think I made it like 2 or 3 loops.
I gotta play it again.
Did you call him Brutus?
Yes. Am I getting the name?
Bluto. I think it's Bluto.
Oh, that's right. It is Bluto. Wow, I'm a moron.
No, don't be so hard on yourself. It's an honest mistake. They're both ridiculous names.
They are.
Why was I thinking it was... Oh, okay.
Just like olive oil. Okay, what's the deal with that?
That's why I was saying Brutus.
Olive oil.
Apparently, in the newer cartoons, he was eventually renamed Brutus.
Is that right?
Oh, I'm reading it on the internet, so it's got to be true. So apparently, there's an article here that says, "Is Popeye's nemesis named Bluto or Brutus?" And apparently, it was both because of some sort of lawsuit.
Interesting.
But I think in the video game, it's Brutus, correct?
I would have to relook at the manual, to be honest.
Real?
Brutus was only around for 2 years on screen, and then they switched it back to Bluto. And in the film, it was Bluto.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, It's
Wait,
like a rundown of the game.
yeah, so what's the time frame on the switch of the character? Like,
Don't just close the tab.
well, because I'm curious, because if the game was released, when did you say it was?
Like a game was released within the window of the name change.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brutus in 1960 and 1961.
So no.
Now I'm gonna have to look up the manual.
But I'm just curious with regard to like, because on the Wikipedia page that I'm looking at for the Popeye game for NES, it's all it mentions is Brutus throughout the whole thing. So I'm kind of curious, like you said,
Really?
what does the manual show? Because
Manual says Brutus is in the manual.
Huh. Well, that explains why you said Brutus.
But that's not when they were referring to him as Brutus, correct? In the cartoon?
Right, yeah, no, that was like in the 60s.
So he was Bluto in the cartoon, but in the NES game in the 80s, he was Brutus, but that wasn't really his name anymore.
Right.
Right?
Right. I don't know. I can't. I have no reason of why it was
That's weird.
changed.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, but hey, enough talking about the villain.
Maybe,
wait before
maybe Bluto is like a Japanese.
Could be some sort of translation thing. I wonder if it's because of who had the licensing rights. Because in the manual, in the start, it has Nintendo of America 1985, and then to the right of that it says copyright 1962 King Features Syndicate.
Oh, that's a very interesting turn of events, isn't it?
That'd be interesting. So apparently, from what I'm seeing on this website here, it looks like originally it was Bluto. It got changed to Brutus in 1960 and 1961 by King Features when they produced 220 new shorts. Apparently it's because they had the rights to it and there was some sort of weird legal research. So it was called Brutus for 2 years and then they switched them back to Bluto. Apparently it's because, from what I'm seeing here, and again, this is all on the internet, so it may not, it's guaranteed to be right. But apparently they did such sloppy research that they said that they called him Brutus because when they did the research, in the first newspaper comics, the villain's name was Brutus. When it was actually Bluto, and they just didn't care. So they just kind of went with Brutus for the game. And then apparently it reverted back to Bluto in 1978 when Hanna-Barbera got the rights for it.
I was disappointed that J. Wellington Wimpy did not make an appearance.
Yeah, Wimpy should be here. Maybe it's just because he had to have been a character by then.
He was definitely in the print comic before then, right?
Yeah. It's a shame you're not collecting cheeseburgers then, too. Maybe that should have been one of the levels. Maybe that could have been a bonus level. You have Wimpy collecting cheeseburgers. Yeah, so it's an arcade game. It's a one-screen arcade game. There's 3 stages before the game loops. Bluto/Brutus is hunting you down. Popeye has a punch, but it's not to just flat-out punch Bluto in the face. It's actually more of a defense to destroy the objects that he's throwing at you, which I found kind of weird. In a Nintendo game, he's clearly throwing alcohol bottles at Popeye.
I could not figure out the whole time what that would punch. When I punched Blutus, nothing happened. He just in the ocean. I did not figure out that could attack the bottles.
Yeah. That, and then when you get to the second loop and you have the Sea Hag, you can actually punch the skulls too. The only time you could actually punch Bluto is if you go to the spinach, which looks like a bush, like a potted plant on the side of the screen. If you eat that, then you can run up to him and punch him. What I didn't like, though, is how when you grab the spinach, everything freezes too. So like I tried to wait till like I had hearts or letters or whatever all over the screen, and then I tried to grab it. Because otherwise, you punch him out, you collect the stuff that you can grab, and then everything else is just like, all right, now I gotta wait a couple seconds. What did you guys think of this one? Personally, I enjoyed it.
I liked it a lot the more I played it. I went back. This was the only one that I went back and played again, like the next day after I played everything for the for this episode. So like, yeah, this was the fun black box game of the week.
I try to get at least one per week.
I mean, you owe us that much.
It's all random, so
you owe us that much.
It's all random. It's all random. I have no real control over what Google tells me I should pick. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Like, it took me a couple attempts to really get down the mechanics of the game, but once I understood how the game worked, like, I really enjoyed myself. Like, I actually had to stop myself from playing after like a good hour or so I can move on to another one of the games to record it. I only got like 2 or 3 loops in, but when you have like a good spree going, if you almost feel invincible.
Yeah.
Until Brutus just like jumps and like punches you out in midair.
Yeah. Yeah. Or he like reaches down he's jumping down the platforms, and it's like, he feels like, it's an earthquake.
Yeah, and it's like, or you're just standing below him, like, he can't reach me down here, and they just like jumps down and punches you. It's
yeah.
like, wait, what?
I know.
You can do that?
Yeah. Or he can punch you when he's on the lower level up. When you're like above him, he can punch through everything to hit you.
Basically, you have to keep moving.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something about Olive Oil's name?
Yeah, what kind of a name is Olive Oil? It's just stupid. Sorry.
Well, being half Italian, I don't really mind the name Olive Oil, as I consume a fair amount of it.
I do too, but I still think it's a dumb name. I'm sorry. For a name, I think it's dumb. But
I knew you were raging the other day, so I figured I'd say it.
Yeah, but the game itself was fun.
Maybe her first name is just Olive, and her last name is Oil.
Maybe her middle name's Canola. I don't know.
You don't mix a seed oil with olive oil, Wayne.
Well,
it's blasphemy.
Shows you how often I use oils in my cooking.
Jeez. But must have bland cooking, sir.
A lot of my recipes just don't require oil. I was actually kind of impressed with the theme song in the game, because you actually get the Popeye theme song when you play the game, when you start it up, when you clear a level. It's actually faithfully done. I was kind of impressed.
Yeah,
for such an early game.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like I always kind of focus in on the same thing, and I apologize for that, because I feel like I'm always just really focusing on one thing. But the fluidity of this game compared to like Ice Climber is so noticeable.
No, it's a legitimate thing to notice. I mean, as I've said, good controls can make or break a game.
Absolutely.
As we've seen with Ice Climber, as we've seen with Clu Clu Land, Popeye's controls are fluid. They are solid. You have control of your character. Now, there is a minor issue I have where if you hit down to go downstairs or up to go up them, there's no middle ground. You can't stop mid-stairs.
Yeah, you're committed.
Once you commit, once you commit, that's it.
Yeah.
So that's got me killed a couple times, but it's one of those things you learn. All right, now I gotta run up. Go as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Now, there's only one thing I can say that I don't like about the game, and again, it's just a technological thing. The graphics are only marginally better than an Atari 2600. I don't know, like, the first stage isn't bad. Second stage is kind of like, The third stage looks like an Atari 2600 game.
Though, I on that, I thought that they did a much better job of giving the game a little bit of depth.
Yes.
And, we've been talking about the technological limits of the time. I mean, it took some really keen design to figure out how to create an environment that felt more three-dimensional than it actually was. And so I think, to their credit, they did a pretty good job, and I think that I enjoyed playing it. It was aesthetically nice.
I think what helps to that too is as Jerry said, the game was released in '82 in arcades. That makes it even more impressive that a game like this, that's roughly 3 years older than Clu Clu Land and Ice Climber, but it can be a much more enjoyable game with a simpler premise.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just shows that, yeah, the black box games, not all of them are heavy hitters, but you come to something like this where it shows what the system was capable of. That it was able to take some of those older arcade games and put them on a console for home release that kids can play them repeatedly, day in day out, and still have enjoyment out of it without having to
Doesn't
go to the arcades to just start chucking quarters in it.
doesn't it make you wonder if the Chicago Tribune people played Popeye?
But they didn't.
Makes me wonder. Apparently not.
Yeah. And what's weird to me too, and again, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and claim to know everything or about the history of the Nintendo and all of that. But when I looked into it, because it was something that just genuinely I was curious about. And I don't know if this is entirely accurate, but what confuses me is like Ice Climber was developed by Nintendo R&D 1. Popeye on the Nintendo also lists Nintendo R&D 1 as a developer.
Mm-hmm.
But Nintendo R&D 1 is seemingly the sole developer of Ice Climber, whereas Popeye has 2 other development teams, I guess, in the way that it's listed. But what is curious to me is R&D 1 is responsible for both games, and I just don't understand how there can be such a contrast.
I believe they were actually responsible for a good majority of the black box games, because that was basically their video game department, I guess you can say.
But as I understand it, Nintendo has, and maybe this is being at the beginning stages, but as I understand it, and maybe I'm misunderstanding things entirely, Nintendo has had different, and probably still do, like different R&D teams.
Yes.
So
you have like R&D 1, R&D 2, R&D 3.
Yeah, it's just curious to me as to how you can have such a stark contrast between, the difficulties of what Ice Climber has, and I'm just talking in terms of the fluidity and the control and the mechanics, and then you play something like Popeye, and it's just so vastly different. And seemingly the same team is involved in both. It's just confusing to me. Mm-hmm. And maybe we're veering way off course here, but I just found it curious as to why. I'd be curious to know why. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't think the Chicago Tribune folks that wrote that.
They probably never played Donkey Kong either.
Are we really going there?
I said Donkey Kong, not Donkey Kong Jr.
I thought you were. I thought you messed up.
You just went there.
Fine.
But yeah, overall, I actually got a little bit of enjoyment out of it. I've never played this one growing up. I never even knew it existed. So playing this game for this podcast, I was pleasantly surprised.
Same. It was a lot of fun. I actually will go back and replay this again. I want to get to the Sea Hag, because I want to. I mean, because level 3 to me was like, that was chaos.
Yeah,
without it, enjoyable chaos. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. Who knows?
I mean, that's just how these old games were. It's all about getting that high score. So It's all about making it a very challenging experience. But then when you got that high score, you felt like you earned it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But I will give this project credit in that I got to experience Popeye for the first time, and I'm not mad about it.
Well, that's a miracle. All right, any closing thoughts on Popeye? I'm guessing that's a no.
I think of all the green vegetables, spinach is one of the most boring.
I think agree with that.
I think we can do.
Yeah, I am not a fan of spinach personally.
Yeah.
Swedish fish and candy and spinach. What an episode, folks.
All right. Where do you guys think we should put Popeye?
Well, why don't you go first there?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Sure, why not?
All right. I am personally, I enjoyed this one. I don't know if this is too high, but I would put it between Duck Hunt and Wrecking Crew.
You're kidding, right?
I'm not kidding.
No, that's where I was going to put it.
Oh, really?
No joke.
That's
'Cause I feel
crazy
like-
because that's where I was going to put it.
Well, that's settled. But yeah, I feel like Duck Hunt, I feel is marginally better, even though it does need a zapper. But it's not like, I feel like Wrecking Crew, again, I didn't really personally like that game, but I know some people did. So, but I personally had a little bit more enjoyment with Popeye, and I feel like it was just a more enjoyable game overall.
Can I guess? You probably thought, tell me if I'm off base, but you probably thought I was going to put it between Wrecking Crew and Ice Climber because you figured I wouldn't rank it lower than Wrecking, or
No,
I would
I
rank
just
it
wasn't
lower.
sure if I just wasn't sure if I was putting it too high because I didn't at the time. I didn't know what you guys thought of the game. After speaking about it, probably should have assumed it would have been fine. But again, when I was playing it, I'm like, ooh. And I was going over my notes before we started recording this, and I'm thinking, this is where I would put it. I don't know if they're going to agree because it's going to be dependent on whether you guys enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad we all enjoyed Popeye. So yeah, Popeye, number 5 on the list out of 12 games between Duck Hunt and Wrecking Crew. So it's top 5, I'd say, is pretty good.
Should we give
It's
the
a-
rundown
it's-
of the rankings that we have so far from 1 to 12?
Yeah, I can do that. So we'll go from bottom to top. How's that? Number 12 is Donkey Kong Jr. Math. Oh, God. That was bad. Number 11, Clu Clu Land. Number 10, Donkey Kong Jr. Number 9, Wild Gunman. Number 8, Gyromite. 7, Ice Climber. 6, Wrecking Crew. 5, Popeye. 4, Duck Hunt. 3, Pinball. 2, Excite Bike. And number 1, Super Mario Brothers, because that should not come as a surprise. So,
Not at all.
with that said, this concludes episode 4 of the Ranking the Retros Roundtable. I'm surprised I can get that out every time.
Yeah, you haven't
I'm really
flubbed it once.
I'm really surprised. I am impressed with myself. So, as I do, I already picked the next 3 games for episode 5, which will be halfway point at once we're done with that. They will be Volleyball, Gumshoe, and Urban Champion. So we have a sports game, a zapper game, and a game where you're beating people up on a street. It's an interesting mix, that's for sure. Thank you both for joining me in this fantastic podcast. I think we had a lot of fun. Had a lot of rage, but that's okay. You know, not every game is going to be thought of as nostalgic. I know there are games I'm sure we'll be talking about later on in further episodes that I really enjoyed growing up, and then I come back to it now. It's like, why? But I feel like we got a lot of good commentary in these games. I think some of them were a little harsh, but fair, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You guys have any closing words?
Yeah, I hope to never see Clu Clu Land ever again.
That is fair.
I second.
I third.
I watched the Popeye movie in a really time.
I don't even know if I've ever actually personally seen it.
You know, it's not groundbreaking exactly, but Robin Williams is pretty entertaining to watch.
I love Robin Williams.
Mm,
To me, Robin Williams could do no wrong.
yeah, he was real, yeah.
Well, except
So-
the movie Jack. But that's a
I don't remember
topic
that
for
one.
another day. Exactly.
You know, I've seen it. I can't picture it. And you know what else was pretty bad? It called Millennium Man, where he played the android character. That it wasn't his fault, but it wasn't very good.
So again, thank you everybody for watching, listening, what have you. Always appreciate you. If you have any thoughts on the games that we've reviewed so far, please feel free to comment. If you have any, I don't know where I was going with that. Because I was
Jeez.
going to say, if you have thoughts on games we're about to do, I mean, you can post them too.
Or what are your
I try to
thoughts
read
on
it.
the current rankings as they stand,
Yeah.
rankings 1 through 12?
Right. Do you actually enjoy Clu Clu Land? Thanks again, everybody. Until next time, happy fragging.